Dear friends. Tonight we will chat a little bit about freelancing. It has gotten quite prominent, and a lot of people decided to start freelancing, partly because of the situation, of course, where a lot of people are being asked to stay at home, where a lot of people have been laid off. And of course, the solution is close to start freelancing. I myself have been a freelancer for about 3 to 4 years before I started hiring people and working with people. So tonight we'll chat a little bit about that. It is Sunday, February 13th, and America has just watched the Super Bowl. And as most of you probably start thinking about getting ready for bed, I know that there are hungry people out there as well who think in their minds, what is my future going to look like? And is freelancing part of it? And that's what we'll chat a little bit here tonight. If you are with me on the live, please comment. I am here. I'm ready. If you are already doing something in freelancing, whether it's full-time or maybe a side hustle, let me know what it is. Put your links in the comments. I want to know. I want to check out what you're doing. Freelancing is a pretty liberating thing. It is something that I believe in the past, before it became very prominent to work for an employer, it was just the default state of a person. Most people worked for themselves, or they worked in the nucleus of a small family setting, and everybody was kind of working for themselves, learning a trade, becoming good at it, and then trying to get compensated in exchange for their services or for their products that they created. So if you have any questions, of course, along the way of this live, put them in the comments as well. I'll try to get to those if I see them. If not, I'll get to those when the live is over. By 2027, apparently, we can face up to 50% of the US workforce working as independent freelancers, or I should say 1099 contractors, right? Because if you freelance, you actually also have to still abide by the rules. And that very often means that if you provide services to a company or even an individual, and you provide more than $600 in services per year, that person or that company needs to provide you with a W-9, and then you have to add that to your year-end tax declaration, right? So when you are freelancing, you are very often considered as an independent 1099 contractor, and that means you still have to pay your taxes and you still have to play by the rules. It is not like you're out in the Wild West. Freelancing, as I said earlier, is something that can be quite rewarding and freeing if you are the right person for it. There's actually quite some qualities and skills that you need to have in order for freelancing to work. And if you have those, then most likely you will really enjoy it. You will find that you have a lot of agency over how you work and when you work. But if you are not cut out for that type of work, you might really find it very hard. You might find that you are lonely. You might find that it is very hard to deal with all that comes with freelancing. And that really takes us into the first subtopic that I wanted to discuss, and that is what are the risks of freelancing. And because it is not just a walk in the park, as they say, there are risks that are tied to choosing that type of lifestyle, or I should say work lifestyle, right? Because of course a big topic is always the so-called work-life balance, and that is something very difficult to achieve as a freelancer, but certainly possible. So the first big problem is that you have no steady income anymore. When you are, at least not at the beginning, and quite possibly for the first year or two, you will see a lot of fluctuations in your income. And that is something that you need to get used to, because if you are an individual that has been a standard employee for a long time, you are used to getting a steady paycheck. In Europe, you are paid monthly. Here in the US, you are paid bi-weekly in most places, I believe. So that means that you don't have to worry about the business actually running. You don't have to worry about new business coming in, about writing contracts between the company and the new service, the new clients, if you will. You don't have to worry about project managing. You don't have to worry about billing. You don't have to worry about bookkeeping. You don't have to worry about anything. All you have to really worry about is to do your job that you were hired for. And in return, because you help your employer fulfill a certain duty in society, whether that is rendering a service or providing a product, building a product, in return, you get a steady paycheck. And when you decide to become a freelancer, you kind of put that safety aside, and you decide to wear all the hats. And that is something I really need you to understand. And that can be quite stressful for people who are not used to doing that. But it is something that you can learn over time, right? You have to just know that it's not gonna work right away. The fluctuation in income is going to feel weird at the beginning. You might have, let's say you start in January, so you might get lucky, actually, as I did when I started freelancing, and you make, let's say, $5,000 in your first month of freelancing, just because you got lucky and you found a good contract that you could work with. However, then that contract ended, and because you didn't have any connections in place yet, and you didn't have any processes in place yet to keep leads coming down your pipeline, after the project ended, you don't have any work. So in February and March, you might not make any money or very little money, or you might even lose money because you have started paying for tools, your website, maybe a billing software, maybe a professional software, and all those fixed costs will continue having to be paid, mostly on a monthly basis, and your income is not always guaranteed, right? On the bright side, though, I will tell you that once you really become persistent and you have your connections and you become known to be good at what you do, you can have wonderful months. You know, I had a month once in which I made $30,000 in a month. And that, of course, would be something that you would probably not be able to make as an employee unless you were in upper level management and maybe you had access to bonuses or some kind of profit sharing options. But probably 99% of employees are not in that situation, right? So not being used to the ups and downs, the so-called feast or famine cycle that a freelancer has to go through at the beginning is a bit of a challenge, right? And by the way, I'm offering you to talk about solutions to all these potential pitfalls. I won't do that in this live, but I will certainly do that in a class that I have on Sundays at 8:30 Central Time. So you can use the link to sign up for that, and we can go and deep dive into all these questions and how you can avoid that feast or famine cycle. Another pitfall is that you need to be very, very self-motivated as a freelancer, because if you do it like most people do when they start out, and also especially in the current environment, you will work from home. You might not even have a dedicated workspace yet, which is a mistake that a lot of new freelancers make. They don't have, even if you are in a studio or one bedroom, you got to have your corner or your space that is your professional space where you go to work, and you got to separate that from the rest of your house or your apartment, because otherwise it's going to get a little bit difficult for your brain to understand, okay, now I am in work mode, in professional work mode, and now I'm just going about my day. If you think you can do your work at the kitchen table or at restaurants or at the beach, as most people think that freelancers operate, that is certainly not the reality. At least at the beginning it is not. Maybe once you really have, you're established and you have very strong processes in place, yes, every now and then you can work from the beach or from anywhere you want. But at the beginning, you want to have your separate office. If you live with other people, it's very important that they understand that you go there to do your job. And it's not just that you piddle paddle around at home. No, you go there to your job, and they need to respect that. They need to not open your door all the time or call you to help with things left and right. That's going to be a little bit of a challenge, actually. People will not really realize at the beginning that you are working. They think somehow, especially if it's an older generation, they just relate being at home with not doing work, right? I'm sure in the future, current generations and future generations, that is no longer going to be a problem so much because they are used to working from home. But certainly with people that worked, had maybe their work lives before you became active, your parents, your grandparents, they will have a hard time wrapping their mind around you working from home. So that is certainly another pitfall to be aware of. Let me see, what else did I put down here? Yeah, so the self-discipline, the self-motivation, if you are not self-driven, you might actually find days where you just do not find the discipline and self-motivation to get up and to get working. It is very easy to sleep in. It is very easy to skip a work day. It is very easy when you feel like it is hopeless and you can't get any contract. It's very easy to just say, I'm just going to take off and take it easy. And while you should do that every now and then, it is important that you don't fall into the trap of doing that too much, right? You don't have a supervisor anymore. You have to be your own boss. You have to be the person that is the strictest in the company. And that is not necessarily easy depending on what personality type you are, right? By the way, if you are watching this live with me, please put something in the comments. It always makes it easier. Maybe you have a question, maybe you have a comment, and then that helps me. All right, let me see. What else do we have here? Yeah, hitting a ceiling is something that can happen as a freelancer, especially if you don't know what you're doing and you don't really think about how you create your pricing, how you sell yourself, your services or your products. Because what you have to understand is that as a freelancer, you are a business owner. You're not just someone who gets money. You are someone who gets money and has to run a business with that. That means that when you receive money for a service rendered or for a product sold, that, let's say you get $100. Those $100 are not all for you to keep. Well, where do they go? Well, as I mentioned earlier, you have certain fixed costs that you need to take care of. Of course, the first one being your rent, your mortgage, your groceries, your health insurance. A lot of freelancers, when they start out, they might forego having any kind of health protection, which is something that I would not recommend. Actually, I'm also very active in the Free Market Medical Association. So if you are a freelancer in that situation, you have no protection at all, reach out to me. I have a solution for you. I have ways for you to have a decent amount of protection and still be a freelancer. So you have, of course, also tools to pay for. You might have a website, or if you are a coach, then you have some sort of online platform where you have your webinars, or at the very least, you need to pay for Zoom. You might have your emails. There's so many things, right? So from those, and of course, let's not forget that at the end of the year, you have to pay taxes on your income, right? So that is just something that you have to really understand, that every $100 that you get do not entirely belong to yourself. You need to understand what your costs are to be in business, because you are no longer an employee. Because when you were an employee, your employer took care of that for you. But you're no longer an employee. You need to be a grown-up. You need to know what are the costs involved to be in business. And you need to know what do I actually also need to survive, to have a decent lifestyle and to make ends meet, as they say so nicely. It is actually quite a good idea as a freelancer to have some solid savings set aside, maybe ideally up to 3 months worth of your expenses, where you pay for everything, right? Your rent and your living expenses. That is highly recommended because of that feast or famine cycle that I was talking to you about to you earlier. When you are in the famine cycle and you have no savings aside, then you panic and your brain cannot do what it needs to do in order to get you set on track to have your next contract or find your next engagement with a client. If you, that all leads to, of course, knowing your cost, needs to setting your pricing. Now, a lot of freelancers make the mistake and they charge an hourly rate. Well, that is one of the biggest mistakes that you can make as a freelancer, because with an hourly rate, you are basically punished for being efficient, right? So if, for example, let's say you need to build a website, right? And most people take 10 hours to build a website. However, you're efficient, you know what you're doing, and you build your website in 5 hours. So why would you now be punished and penalized for being efficient, right? So that is why you need to think value-based compensation instead of time-based. That is important as a freelancer. Otherwise, you will basically your limit is the amount of hours available in a day, right? There are 24 hours for every human being, and you probably want to sleep at least, you should sleep for at least 8 hours, and then you also want to have a life. You might have other obligations. Most people have families that they need to spend some time with. So if you don't think very focused in a focused way and strategic way about how you're gonna exchange your time for for your work, how you get compensated, then you might not be very happy. So again, and that is something I can talk about in future sessions, and you can also just join one of the sessions here using the link, and we'll dive deeper into a topic of your choice on a Sunday night, where we can have a one-on-one or maybe a small group setting. Okay, how much can you get paid as a freelancer? Well, most freelancers don't make so much because they don't know what they're doing. But once they do know what they're doing, and once they have learned, again, to not exchange their time on an hourly basis, but to think value-based compensation, to create packages within their offering structure, to have different steps of, we call it the value ladder, right? Where you give your clients a chance to test the waters, and then once they get to know you and they know that your work is good, you can kind of get them on a higher level where you sell them a little bit of a higher service. And once that has been established, then you might get them into some form of retainer, some form of ongoing payment structure. That is ideally what you do as a freelancer, to make sure you get paid what your time is worth, and also what you need in life in order to survive and in order to feed your family or realize the projects that matter to you. I will say that there are a few very, very successful freelancers, independent contractors out there. They typically master their craft. They are experts in what they're doing. And they also understand that besides being an expert in what they're doing, they have to market themselves correctly. And that is an aspect that, of course, I am an expert in. I think it is tremendously important to build up a online persona that represents you and your work, so that if people Google your name, a lot of different assets pop up that showcase your expertise and that showcase your experience. Go ahead and try that with my name, Shanka Poncelet. You will probably see the first 2 to 3 results on Google are pages are full of references to my life's work, my life's expertise, and that is going to be very, very important. That's like especially in the digital age and the age that is in front of us, which is the virtual age, you have to leave a digital trace in your life that always reflects your value and expertise. That is something that is sticky to you. And if you're a company, by the way, then that is called reputation management. But also as a person, as a freelancer, you have a reputation to manage. So that is how you do that, and how you want to make sure that each time you create something, each time you put something out there in the world, each time you receive a degree, a certificate, a reward, each time you volunteer somewhere, got to document it online. And one of the best ways to do that, by the way, is LinkedIn. And definitely, again, want to talk about LinkedIn in more depth in one of our upcoming sessions. If you use the link here that is blended in, you can book a slot with me to take a deep dive into that. Okay, so how do you start freelancing? Well, first of all, you have to make the decision that you want to do it. And the big question, of course, is what do you want to offer? So there are so many schools of thought around that. Should you do something that you are passionate about? Should you do something that you are good at? Should you do something where there's a market for it? All of these questions are great questions. I won't go in this live, I won't go into how you find that out, but I will give you a few clues, though. You have to be good at what you're doing, okay? And there needs to be a market, there needs to be a demand for it. That's very important. So again, there's a process that you can go through to find out what that should be. We can talk about that in the future if you want. But you have to define what it is that you're going to offer. Once that is defined, you want to decide on which legal structure do you want to do that. Do you want to do it just as a person accepting money from clients? Then you don't have to do much formal work, paperwork. You just really should probably get your DBA, doing business as. In most states, I believe you do that with the county clerk. At least here in Texas, in Bexar County, you would go to the Bexar County clerk and get your DBA. But probably a lot of you will go and create an LLC, single member LLC, because that gives a little bit of added protection in case you do something that is a potentially harm for your client. You have a certain protection in an LLC, which stands for limited liability company. Okay, so limited liability means that everything that you harbor inside of the LLC is at least to some degree protected from being garnished or being taken away from by certain instances or people. The other reason why you should probably think about an LLC is because in an LLC you can write off your expenses, meaning you don't have to pay tax on things that you bought for your business or on expenses that you had to make in order to make your business going. Okay, so talk to a accountant about that. There's a lot of information out there, and decide whether you want to do it under your name as a DBA or whether you want to go the route and create an LLC. So once that is done, you have to put yourself out there. You have to let people know that your services are available to be contracted. And there's so many ways to make that happen. One of the ways, of course, is to create a website and start doing online content strategies and maybe some online advertisement. But if that is not your cup of tea, you can also successfully start freelancing without any of the online presence. It is possible. If you have strong interpersonal relationships with your community, you might join a chamber of commerce or some other local group that has an interest in a certain field, and you can just maybe create simple business cards with your phone number and your email and then you can let people know that you are available for hire, or not hire, but that you are available to work for them and as an independent contractor or freelancer. Yeah, so you can, at the beginning, reach out to your network, let your network know that you have something to offer. Go on Facebook and message everyone in there, tell them, hey, I have started baking cookies. And if you want cookies in the future, or if you know someone who wants cookies, let me know. That is, send them my way, right? So it's very important that you put yourself out there. Of course, LinkedIn, since we are also streaming this on LinkedIn, LinkedIn is a very, very powerful platform to make that happen. And if you want to know how you can optimize your profile to attract the right type of people to their attention to you, you should definitely look at the URL here blended in and RSVP for one of the upcoming sessions. One more thing before I wrap this up, and I will look at the questions if we have some online. Definitely will take a look. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there and say, I'm ready to help. Too many people think that they're not good enough yet. They don't have what it takes. That is all. If everybody thought like that, nobody would ever start, right? Let me tell you, in order to help someone in a way that it is effective, very often you just need to know a little bit more than they do about the field that you want to help. Okay, so whenever you have a client and yourself, you got to ask yourself, are we a good match? Are we somehow on a level? Are we somehow in a relationship balance where I can ethically say, I know a little bit more than this person, and this person is at this level with their business, and I can help, and I deserve to be compensated for that. Now, know your boundaries. If you are a one-person social media marketer, for instance, you're not going to accept a contract where you have to do social media marketing for the largest, whatever, let's say, grocery store, right? Here in Texas, HEB, right? If I were a freelancer in social media marketing and HEB would approach me, which would never happen, but let's just assume it would, then you would have to say, well, I don't think that's a good fit. I don't think that's ethically and morally correct to accept that, and I have to politely decline that. But definitely do not be afraid to say that whatever level you are at in offering value, if you feel like the situation is as such that you really help the other person or the other business at a rate that is fair and that represents the value rendered, then you are absolutely qualified to request money for that and to be paid for that. So I think that is a term, imposter syndrome. Don't have that. That is really very self-deprecating if you think that you're not good enough to be in business for it. Okay, and by the way, if you are not, you will find out, because you will basically fail in your enterprise, which, by the way, it's very tough to just realize that, but most businesses fail within their first year. Most businesses do, which means that most people that are listening to this and that'll start a business will probably fail. However, and this is important, if you are persistent and believe in doing what you have in mind, then you will not get up. You will learn from the situation, make a few adjustments, and then you go and try again. And this time you make less mistakes. You will still make mistakes, yeah, but you will make less mistakes, and maybe you will go longer than a year, right? And it'll take a few iterations until you made it. You will make it. It definitely is possible to sustain yourself and your family with everything that you need, and even a little bit of extra, just by being a never-ending student of your skill, and by understanding that you have, as a successful freelancer, you have to wear a lot of hats, and you have to become proficient in all of the roles that you have to play. And again, that is something we can talk about more in depth if you schedule one of my upcoming sessions here using the link. I hope this was helpful to you. I will go and take a look at the comments. Maybe there were some. I don't see any comments here on LinkedIn. Let me see on Facebook if I see anything. Nope. We did have 2 silent observers for my entire life, so thank you for that, and I hope it was helpful to you. And you will start your work week tomorrow very strong, with good spirits, right? See you again very soon. Bye bye for now.